Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cassandra 2023. And this morning, we begin the first of 3 days of what we hope will be honest, open online conversations between politicians, researchers, supranational agencies, writers, artists, sociocultural activists, NGOs, and above all, citizens from Africa, the Mediterranean, and beyond, in order to identify the socio-political consequences of climate change, and above all, how to overcome them. You will have the opportunity to hear people who work to save those who desperately strive to cross the Mediterranean in a small boat. You will hear women describing how they overcome social barriers to their leadership in environmental issues. You will hear the voices of activists from the slums of Africa explaining how they work tirelessly to make their neighborhoods a better place to live and a better place to hope. And you will hear representatives from the United Nations, the European Commission, the World Bank, and Pan-African organizations who are working for a more sustainable future. We hope that you will enjoy watching and listening, but above all, that you yourself become part of a new movement, the Cassandra movement, that seeks to unite science with policy, art with the environment, empathy with expertise, so that Africa, the Mediterranean, and the global community can face the coming years with a greater and clearer sense of purpose. I'm delighted to be able to introduce in this introductory section, first of all, MICHELA, who represents UNESCO. She's the director of the Water Assessment Program of UNESCO, and I would like to pass the word over to her. Welcome, Michela.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Good morning. Good morning, dear participants and speakers, dear audience. This is actually my second appointment with Cassandra Conference, which I had the pleasure to introduce in 2021 in its first edition. And the power of Cassandra is straightforward. It is a platform of free discussion where the international community shares and compares idea and knowledge on the critical intertwine between climate change and health, mass migration, conflict, and gender inequality. And it does it through the analysis of 7 pillars or solutions. I thank my dear friend Richard ELELMAN, the entire director of this event, and the Eurecat for the excellent organization. We cannot, I listened something, well, okay. We cannot talk about climate change and its interlinkages without talking about water. And of course, I wish to do it representing the UNESCO World Water Assessment Program, who coordinates the production of the UN World Water Development Report on behalf of UN Water. Water is indeed the medium through which societies experience the most severe impacts of climate change and climatic variability, but it is also the most important medium that allows our generation and the future generations to adapt well to the climate change. We are already impacted by the rising number of natural disasters due to climate change extremes, which make some part of the world no more inhabitable, even for a long time. Actually, 90% of all displacements worldwide during the last 10 years are due to water-related natural disasters. Poorest countries and societies are most vulnerable to minor and major shocks, as they have a lower ability to respond to climate change impacts. And very often, their capacity to act is hindered by poor governance. As a result of the ongoing climatic variabilities, decisions to migrate due to natural disaster or to environmental causes such water scarcity and consequent lack of food and lack of jobs are currently increasing. In fact, the prolonged drought causes persistent unemployment, which eventually leads to migration from rural to urban impacts. And women. The impacts could be extremely even heavy for women, who comprise about 43% of the agricultural labor force globally, approximately half the level at world level. Combination of elements like climate change, water scarcity, pandemics and health diseases, mass migration, and other crises are strictly interrelated and exacerbated social inequalities, including gender inequalities. They can lead to increased insecurity, resource users conflicts, and eventually political unrest. These challenges demands a comprehensive, collaborative, and holistic approach that leverage scientific advancements, technological innovations, and social-political strategies to build resilient communities and foster sustainable solutions that prioritize human rights, gender equality, and environmental stewardship. And the solutions to put in place are diverse, as you can see in the Cassandra panels, from the interdisciplinary approach to managing the environment, like the nexus among water, energy, ecosystems, and others, or adopting the source-to-sea approach to assessing and monitoring through data collections and analysis, in particular the disaggregated data, to highlight the gaps, the differences, the social inequalities, including gender inequalities, applying all the available tools and methodologies, like the WWAP toolkit for gender analysis. Finding interdisciplinary, human-centered solutions to these complex challenges is key to achieving the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The 2001 UNESCO Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity states that cultural diversity is a necessary for humankind as biodiversity is for nature. Indeed, culture can also provide solutions to the future, where humanity is able to adapt to a new climate and a new reality in harmony with nature. For example, local knowledge such traditional natural resources management techniques and food security strategies are a particularly powerful source of resilience and intangible heritage for future generations to maintain. Finally, connecting science, technology, culture through an artistic language can be an inspiring way to foster key messages and raise awareness at global level. And with these words, I would like to conclude, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful discussion during the conference. Thank you very much. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed, Michela. Thank you very much for your kind words and also for your very wise words. Now, what I would like to do is to introduce two videos. The first one is done by Daniel Altimiras, who is the president of the Eurecat Foundation. And the second one is by the Minister for Climate and also Rural Affairs of the Catalan government, Mr. David MASCORT.
Good morning, and on behalf of Eurecat, I would like you to welcome to the second edition of the Cassandra Conference. The Cassandra Conference was created in 2021 to address the vital questions. What will be the social political consequences of climate change, And how can society mitigate its effects on issues such as public health, migration, gender equality, the environment, and even the potential for future conflicts? What is obvious? It does all members of society have a role to play in overcoming such challenges. Public administrations, industry and SMEs, citizens, cultural stakeholders, and research institutes and universities must come together in order to co-design, implement, and analyze actions based on consensus, trust, and accountability if we are to comfort the issues that Cassandra wishes to examine and create a more sustainable future for people, not only in Africa and the Mediterranean region, but around the world. Many people ask me why a center of technology, a research institute such as Eurecat, should be the instigator of an activity such as Cassandra. The answer is easy. We believe that the technologies, the science, and the researchers have a vital role to play in establishing the social and economic sustainability of a modern society. It is our responsibility to listen to the needs of the politician and administrator, to work with and support the industrialists and the entrepreneur, to collaborate with the writer, actor, and artist, and above all, to interact with the citizen, not only of Catalonia, but of the Mediterranean, Africa, South America, and Asia. In this way, we can provide technological solutions and objective scientist data to the debate. Eurecat has been a pioneer in recognizing the social political role that the research has. We have, over the last decade, worked closely with organizations such as the United Nations, the European Commission, the Union for the Mediterranean, the OCDE, the World Bank, and countless national, subnational, and municipal governments in order to understand better their needs and requirements whilst we actively initiate programs designed to stimulate public interaction with technology, citizen engagement, citizen science, and science art diplomacy. Cassandra is an example of our approach to the social political aspects of our work. We believe that we have the responsibility to take the initiative to examine the principal social issues of our times and provide, from a technical perspective, the means to improve the reality of people, no matter their nationality, ethnicity, or gender. In recent years, we have actively promoted the importance of the connection between water, energy, food, the environment, and public health in what is known as the WWAP plus each nexus. Together with the European Commission and the Union for the Mediterranean, we have created the book, The Gateway to the Future of the Mediterranean, which for the first time demonstrates the capacity to unite science and the arts in order to communicate clearly with ordinary citizens who wish to be informed about climate change and the physical world in which we live. Eurecat is the co-creator of the Renaissance approach to ensuring that science and technology contribute to the enhancement of transboundary dialogue between different regions and cities, using science and the emotional stimuli of art to communicate and resolve universal obstacles to the improvement of the lives of people. We live in a world of multiple crises. As a result, and as was the case, for example, when the COVID-19 pandemic appeared, researchers, technologists, and scientists are obliged more than ever to provide practicable solutions. But to offer answers, we must first understand the challenges and interact with reality on the ground. We must provide the necessary data and the means to transform that knowledge into tangible facts to counter the cases of so much suffering which leads to migration, poor health, discrimination against women, and increased competition for access to natural resources. We must communicate our knowledge in clear messages, not only to our peers, but above to all the citizens and their representatives. We are capable of supporting citizen engagement and meaningful citizen science wherever the researchers and hitherto uninformed layperson can work to a significant mutual benefit. We can provide the means for the water sector to collaborate with the producers of energy, the suppliers of food, and the protectors of our ecosystems and biodiversity. The dialogue between all sectors must be open, honest, and based on mutual respect. Cassandra is concerned with creating such a dialogue and seeking a constructive debate. We are delighted to welcome some of the most prestigious experts in the world regarding migration, health, gender equality, climate change, diplomacy, and even the art of this online event. We welcome organizations such as the United Nations Environment Programme, UNESCO, the European Commission, the Government of Catalonia, and the Union for the Mediterranean. Together, we highly distinguished entities, NGOs, and local interest groups for the Mediterranean and Africa, who will be openly expressing their opinions, their hopes and fears over the world coming 2.5 days. But above all, we welcome you who you are listening to us. We ask you to share your feelings and to support the work which will be undertaken because of this conference. Above all, we invite you to welcome and to become involved in the Cassandra program, now and in the future, so that together we can provide some light and realistic hope for people who urgently require support and the opportunity of a better future. Moltes gràcies, muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Bon dia a tots i totes. El primer que m'agradaria fer és disculpar-me per no poder ser en viu avui aquí a la conferència Cassandra, organitzada per la Fundació Eurecat, però no volia deixar passar l'oportunitat per dirigir-vos unes paraules. Crec que avui dia tothom és conscient que el canvi climàtic té afectacions directes al nostre dia a dia. Tots els organismes públics disposem de multitud d'informes que així ho corroboren. Informes que ens diuen, per exemple, que la temperatura mitjana al nostre país ha pujat, que la qualitat de l'aire empitjora cada dia o que el nostre litoral es troba al límit. Per això, avui això ja no va d'informes. Avui ja és una nova realitat. I aquesta, sense anar més lluny, l'hem estat veient durant aquest 23 a Catalunya. Temperatures de rècord, 200 nits tòrrides aquest any, l'escalfament del Mediterrani o la sequera en són alguns exemples. Aquesta és la nova realitat, a la qual entre tots i totes hem de fer-hi front. Ens hem d'adaptar, hem de mitigar, en definitiva, hem de gestionar. I per això cal que actuem en tots els escenaris, tant els econòmics com els socials i els ambientals, mediambientals. Les conseqüències de no afrontar-ho són molt greus, són gravíssimes. No fer res davant d'aquesta situació és desistir, és ser egoista, és no pensar en quin futur deixem a les noves generacions. Per això, des del Govern de la Generalitat i des del Departament d'Acció Climàtica hem dut a terme moltes accions per treballar amb un consens de país que ens ajudi a tirar endavant aquesta lluita. L'obsessió per fer possible el desplegament total de la Llei de Canvi Climàtic a Catalunya, que té com a finalitat reduir les emissions de gasos amb efecte hivernacle i afavorir la transició cap a una economia neutra en emissions el 2050. La creació de l'Estratègia Catalana d'Adaptació al Canvi Climàtic per l'horitzó 2030, amb 72 objectius operatius que es despleguen en 312 mesures d'adaptació per als diversos sistemes naturals, àmbits socioeconòmics i territoris del país. També la Taula Social del Canvi Climàtic, un òrgan col·legiat consultiu de participació i d'assessorament, o la recentment convocatòria de l'Assemblea Ciutadana pel Clima, una assemblea formada per 100 ciutadanes i ciutadans que debatran opcions per Catalunya per fer front a aquests reptes. També aprovarem nous impostos que estan en vies d'aprovar-se, com el d'emissions portuàries dels grans vaixells, de mesures de qualitat de protecció de l'aire. També creiem que la transició energètica és vital. Per això estem promovent el desplegament de les energies renovables distribuïdes i participades i la creació de l'energètica, l'empresa pública que es dedica a produir i subministrar energia d'origen renovable. Perquè tot això va de salut, va de biodiversitat, va de treball, va d'oportunitats per tothom, va de benestar, en definitiva, va de vida. És una qüestió de prioritzar la salut de les persones, visquin on visquin. La manera d'afrontar la crisi climàtica no és nova. Calen compromisos internacionals més ambiciosos i accions urgents per reduir les emissions de gasos d'efecte hivernacle i recuperar els ecosistemes. Per això, projectes com el Cassandra, un esdeveniment global on experts de tot el món debatreu sobre el canvi climàtic i els seus efectes en la societat i el món en el que vivim, poden ser tan importants per definir les estratègies a seguir. Jornades com les d'avui del projecte Cassandra resulten interessants i espero que ens ajudin a entendre les conseqüències del canvi climàtic en el context de la Mediterrània i del nord d'Àfrica. Gràcies.
So thank you very much to those two speakers who pre-recorded their speeches. And it's now my pleasure, and indeed my honor as well, to be able to present the Chief Scientist of the United Nations Environment Programme, ANDREA HINWOOD. ANDREA, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you to Eurecat, and thank you to the Cassandra team for actually having me and allowing me to talk with you today. So I think, as already has been alluded to, we are all experiencing a changed environment, whether it's climate events, heat, obvious things like pollution, and we see plastics everywhere. I'm actually here talking to you from Kenya, where we have the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for a treaty on plastics at the moment, or where we see changes to the natural environment, biodiversity and nature loss. And all of this affects the livability of the areas where we all live. That means the provision of infrastructure, including comfort, i.e. so that we can keep cool, where we have food, services, while also maintaining the environment that we all live in and on which we depend. And I think sometimes we forget about the fact that we are reliant on a functioning environment for the services that we require to live. Some of the issues that have already been touched on, and in particular migration and involuntary migration, I think we all understand quite clearly that climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of events. And of course, what that means is people lose their homes and they have to move, sometimes for a short period, sometimes for a longer period. Combined with that, we also have an increasing number of conflicts globally, which is also causing people to move. So in terms of involuntary migration, we're looking at 70 million people already are moving due to climate and conflict. These issues are only going to get worse because we're seeing the increase and intensity of events. Some countries are already starting to plan. We know that some countries are moving, for example, people who live in areas that are prone to landslides and flood events. You know, our natural instinct is to want to go back to where we live, but some of these areas are going to continue being impacted. And hence we need to start to look at this aspect of prevention, i.e. prevention of harm to people who live in areas. And that means both mitigating climate change, adapting to climate change, but also preventing and preparing for the hazards that we experience. And so as climate change continues to exacerbate these issues, we need to provide support for people in terms of housing, health, employment, education. And a lot of that means we have to start looking at how we develop infrastructure and how we plan our cities, our urban wildland interface, etc., so that we can prepare people for what's coming in terms of wildfires, particularly in areas that haven't had wildfires before, but also to adapt to some of these changes. How do we, with a situation of migration needing to house people in areas where we're actually warming, we heard about temperatures before, how do we provide thermal comfort and housing that actually addresses some of those changes that are coming? And of course, we need to make sure we do that in a way that doesn't exacerbate further climate change, i.e. we have to make sure that we have our eye on mitigating and adapting to climate change, and that we don't actually make the problems that we already have worse. So it's also evident that the most vulnerable in society are experiencing these effects on climate change, biodiversity, and nature loss and pollution firsthand. So the poorest, women and children, are suffering most from the frequency and intensity of events, from loss of homes, opportunities for education, jobs, and where exposures in terms of environmental stresses, such as pollution from insecure water resources, is amplified. And I can't stress enough, sometimes we talk about pollution and waste, and they're like the invisible part of it. We know when we experience a heat event, but we don't necessarily see those pollutants in the water, in the soil, in the air, that actually are affecting our health. And of course, particularly for our children who are very vulnerable to the effects of pollution, this then continues later on in life. So we've got some challenges we've got to tackle straight up. Clearly, UNEP works across these issues at the global level to try to help countries put in place measures to address the triple planetary crisis. But we need to address the fundamentals of inequality and poverty. And so we're really talking here about looking at gender equity and intergenerational equity. And that means we need to start thinking about what this means for future generations. So what does it mean for my children and their children? And I want to leave the planet in a better place than I found it, so that they have opportunities and they can actually have good lives. So we're working really hard on these issues. We recently produced the Adaptation Gap Report, which actually outlines the need to adapt to climate change. Many countries are not putting in place measures or enough measures to actually adapt. But if we think about it logically, if we think about the future, if we think about what we need to do in regard to mitigation, that if we put in place plans and we prepare, because we know what's coming and we have lots of the solutions, we actually have this within our grasp and has already been outlined. If we actually consider the needs of those who are vulnerable and we address poverty, inequality, food security, and provide development opportunities while considering a greener type lifestyle, we can actually mitigate, adapt, and have fair and equitable resources for communities to share. So I guess I'm hoping that this opportunity for this conference, people get together, and as UNEP says, we actually understand what's happening here. And yes, there are gaps in the science, but the science has actually got us to this point where we do understand climate change. We do understand what's actually happening to the range of different environments. We really now need to move into the solution space and actually applying these solutions, but coming together as groups of people across all walks of life to actually help solve some of these problems. So I hope your Cassandra event is really successful. I look forward to hearing about some of these discussions, and thank you very much for listening. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrea. Thank you very much for that optimistic message as well, despite all of the crises and all of the challenges that the society at the moment has to face. But I do agree with you, especially with regards to what you were saying about the need really to convert data and knowledge into action. I mean, that I think is, would you agree that that's the principal challenge that we're now facing, that we have the knowledge, but that it has to be translated into action on the ground?
Yeah, I think now we're talking about, so if we understand adaptation in a particular area and what is going to help make a community resilient, what are the measures that we need to put in place to put that adaptation plan in action? And this seems to be where the problem is, that we know what we should be doing. So again, I think we know some of the successes when we try and translate the science into a policy agenda is you need to engage stakeholders and you need to engage the people who both have some of the solutions, but also who live in those areas, who understand those environments better than anybody else. So we need to start engaging much more with communities and with different stakeholders to resolve these issues. I think if we start to do that and we start to show those examples, others can take that up.
Yeah, I honestly couldn't agree more with that. Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much, MILETTO. Thank you very much, Daniel ALTIMIRAS, and thank you very much as well to David MASCORT to having participated in this simple introduction to what is the Cassandra Conference. We will now be passing over to the first panel, which is perhaps dramatically entitled The Devastating Pathway of the 21st Century. But I hope that the optimism and the realistic approach, which Andrea and also the other speakers have reflected, can come to fruition as a result of Cassandra and as a result of many other actions that are happening around the world. So thank you to everyone, and please enjoy the conference. And I hope it's of great use and of great interest to all of you. Thank you.